A long time ago, I discussed former outfielder Vince Coleman's 1986 season, one of the most unique seasons in MLB history. In short, in spite of a terrible 581 OPS and 62 adjusted OPS, Coleman not only led the entire league in stolen bases, he came within reach of the all-time single-season record. Coleman's 109 stolen bases that year are the fourth most ever in the modern era, and he's just the fourth player ever to reach the 100 stolen base plateau since 1900. It's nothing short of incredible how somebody with offensive stats that lousy was able to steal that many bases, and nearly 40 years later, it's still one of the worst offensive seasons by a player who also led the league in stolen bases. However, it's not the worst. There was a season by another outfielder that was much worse offensively, and yet led his league in stolen bases. Over a quarter century later, nobody has even gotten close to accomplishing what this player did. Who is this player, and what exactly did he do? The player in question is Brian Hunter. Hunter was a center fielder who played in Major League Baseball for 10 seasons from 1994 to 2003. He played for 6 teams, but spent the most time with the Houston Astros and Detroit Tigers. In his career, Hunter played in exactly 1,000 games and came to the plate over 3,600 times. He slashed .264 with a .313 on base and .346 slugging for a .660 OPS and 72 adjusted OPS. A light hitter, Hunter never posted notable hitting stats. He has under 900 career hits, under 200 extra base hits, fewer than 750 combined RBIs and runs scored, and only earned 7.4 WAR. He was a solid fielder and center, having 3.2 D-WAR in his career. However, his main value came on the base path. Hunter was one of the great base stealers of his era, stealing 260 bases during his career. That includes leading all of Major League Baseball in steals in 1997 with 74, while a member of the Tigers. Since that year, only twice has a Tiger gotten within 30 stolen bases of that mark. While Hunter led the league that season in stolen bases, it wasn't the only time he did so. He led MLB in steals in 1997 and led the American League in stolen bases 2 years later in 1999 with 44. What's notable about that 1999 season though is that in spite of stealing more bases than any other player in the American League, Brian Hunter was one of the worst hitters. That season, Hunter played in 139 games and came to the plate 589 times. He slashed .232 with a .280 on base and .301 slugging for a .581 OPS, 48 adjusted OPS, and earned -0.5 WAR. Yes, you heard those numbers correctly. Brian Hunter stole 44 bases while having a 48 adjusted OPS. Honestly, one might argue that number could be lower. Hunter spent the first 3 weeks of the season with the Detroit Tigers, where, in 18 games, he didn't steal a single base, but had a .621 OPS, 60 adjusted OPS, and earned 0.5 WAR. In late April, he was traded to the Seattle Mariners, who he stole all 44 bases with. As a Mariner, Hunter had an OPS of .576, adjusted OPS of 46, and earned -1.0 WAR. For simplicity's sake, I'll use his total numbers from 1999, but I mentioned that just to show that he still would have led the American League in stolen bases with even worse stats. Anyway, I don't think I need to explain just how terrible a .581 OPS and 48 adjusted OPS are. For context, the American League-wide average OPS that year was .786, more than 200 points higher than Hunter's mark. In fact, there were 157 qualified hitters in Major League Baseball in 1999. Of that group, Hunter is second to last in both OPS and adjusted OPS. In case anybody is wondering, the one player with lower marks was Chicago White Sox shortstop Mike Caruso, who was just barely below Hunter in the rankings. Although, if we hypothetically only use Hunter's stats while in Seattle, he'd be dead last. Brian Hunter was pretty much the worst hitter in Major League Baseball in 1999, and yet, still led the American League in stolen bases. Stealing that many bases while having stats that terrible is nothing short of an anomaly. And to see just how much of an anomaly Brian Hunter's season was, let's compare it to other seasons all time. We'll look at two categories: players to steal at least 44 bases in a season, and players with a 48 or lower adjusted OPS. In the history of Major League Baseball, through 2024, there have been exactly 743 instances of a player stealing 44 or more bases in a single season. Hunter's 48 adjusted OPS is by far the lowest, a full 7 points lower than Willie Taveras with the second lowest. The difference between Hunter at first and Taveras at second is the same between Taveras at second and, funny enough, Vince Coleman at 14th. Looking at OPS, Hunter's mark is the 17th lowest all time and 6th lowest in the live ball era. For WAR, Hunter's mark is the 14th lowest. However, if we used his mark solely as a member of the Mariners, it would be the 6th lowest of all time. I might add that, even if we use Hunter's original negative 0.5 WAR, nobody that had a lower OPS also had a lower WAR. It was legitimately the worst offensive season of any player in this group. That just covered players to steal 44 bases. What about players to match Hunter's adjusted OPS? We'll look at players with a minimum 500 plate appearances in a single season. Using that minimum, there have been only 31 occurrences of a player achieving an adjusted OPS at or lower than 48. Hunter's 44 stolen bases are, naturally, the most of any player, a full 14 more than the second most, coming from Jiggs Parrott of the 1894 Chicago Colts with 30. In the modern era, Hall of Famer Ozzie Smith is second with 28 stolen bases and an identical 48 adjusted OPS, coming as a member of the 1979 San Diego Padres. Now, I must say, this all comes with a minimum threshold. What if we looked at the leaderboard regardless of plate appearances? For all players throughout MLB history with a 48 or lower adjusted OPS and no minimum threshold, Brian Hunter is still number 1. He just barely beats out Jim Donnelly of the 1887 Washington Nationals, who had 42 stolen bases and a 39 adjusted OPS. By the way, that Washington Nationals team has zero relation to the current franchise or any of the previous Washington Senators franchises. If we look in the modern era again, the second most stolen bases belongs to the aforementioned Ozzie Smith and Jerry Royster of the 1977 Atlanta Braves, who also stole 28 bases with a 46 adjusted OPS. Brian Hunter didn't just surpass modern era players on this list, he practically lapped them. There has never been anybody before to steal that many bases in a single season while also being that poor of a hitter. That raises the ultimate question though. How is this possible? How can somebody that basically had one of the worst hitting seasons ever also lead his league in stolen bases? To put it simply, Brian Hunter was an extremely efficient base stealer. His 44 stolen bases were coupled with 8 times caught stealing for 52 stolen base attempts and the stolen base percentage of 84.61%. Just how good is 84.61%? Well, let's look at the all-time leaderboard. There have been 546 occurrences of a player attempting 52 or more stolen bases in a single season. Hunter's 84.61 mark ranks as the 71st highest, or in the top 13% of all players. At the time he accomplished this in 1999, Hunter's mark was 49th at 443 instances, or in the top 11%. Those numbers speak for themselves, but wait, there's more. Those percentages take into account players with at least 52 stolen base attempts. What about players with at most 52? For players to attempt at most 52 stolen bases in a single season, Hunter's 44 steals are tied for the third most, just 3 behind the leaders with 47. In layman's terms, he had one of the most successful stolen base campaigns by a player of all time. He didn't reach base often, but when he did, odds are he would steal a base. In 1999, Brian Hunter had not only the worst offensive season by a hitter in the league that year, but it was one of the worst hitting seasons of all time. Despite that, he had elite base running skills and was so successful, he was able to lead the American League in steals with 44. Over a quarter century later, it's still one of the most unique seasons in MLB history, a season we may not see again for a long time.